going to school. I spent a lot of time with him in my late high school years. I spent 3 years. We'd drive together to school. We'd work out at the same time.
Her best friends were my students, you know? It was just, I knew way too much.
The idea for today's podcast was hatched at the 2021 WABASE Institute, and we made it happen. Thank you to today's guests for being willing to do this unconventional kind of podcast, and I had a blast chatting with them both. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contra-Bass Conversations, and we're talking today with Paul Sharpe and Ella Sharpe. Are they related? Yes, they are. Paul is the double bass teacher at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. Ella Sharpe, his daughter, studied bass with him. We talk about that. Studied bass with him also at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. We talk about that, and is now an undergrad at the University of Southern California. So we talk about what's it like studying with your dad, bass. How did each of them get into the bass? Fun stories from being a father-daughter, teacher-student kind of setup, and much more. This is a great conversation. Both of them are a lot of fun, and I really hope you enjoy this. Quick shout out to our sponsors, Upton Bass, Ear Trumpet Labs, and Dorico. More on them later, and let's get into this conversation with Paul and Ella Sharpe. How are things in the month or so? Not even or maybe around a month since I saw both of you.
Yeah, I guess it has been a month. They've been going great. I'm doing domain online, so more online stuff. Hopefully, it's the last of the online festivals, but who knows?
I hope so too. Yeah, I'm sure online domain is better than no domain, but in-person domain is probably the way to go. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. It was cool to do. Like, I had such a great time just being a fly on the wall at WABASE after all these Zoom events. And obviously, there are advantages to doing this sort of thing, and you can collaborate in all sorts of different ways. But boy, to just see people in person and do things in person, it's incredible.
Exactly. Yeah. And thank you for that video. I watched it the other day, and it brought me right back to the WABASE experience. It was really nice.
Oh, you bet. Thanks for chatting with me for that. I've got a lot more footage because Jacob passed along everything he took too. So I think I came home with 400 gigabytes of WABASE footage. So I don't know what the heck I'm going to do with all of this. I did that one video, and then I realized, like, we had such a great conversation, Ella. I realized what I should have done. And if I go back another time, what I'll do is actually sit down with everybody and chat. But it was tough because I came in at the very end and everybody was doing dress rehearsals, and it was just hard to do that. But I've got all this great footage of you playing, and I've got the recital footage, and they're giving me the audio. So I'll try to put out the recital in some capacity. That's probably like the next project. So we'll see.
Cool. That sounds great. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What have you been up to, Paul? Weren't you doing a festival too or something?
I was, yeah. I did a 2 week long, 2 week long in bass intensive with people from all over the United States. I had I think it was mostly 8 kids most of the time for each of the classes: technique classes, NYO, USA, audition classes, master classes, and it was just me doing it all. And I each got 2 lessons in a week, so 4 total lessons for each of them over the time.
Okay.
So yeah, I was busy up until about last week when her domain started, and so I took some time off. I went to the mountains and camped.
Nice. Yeah. And Ella, when does school start up for you? Is it in August or?
Yeah, school starts August 23rd or somewhere early or late August, I should say. But I'm flying out to go back to Los Angeles on the 3rd. So I've got a little bit of time left, and then I'm back.
Okay, cool. And are you going to be a junior or a senior next year?
Yeah, technically I'll be finishing out my second half of my junior year because I took a semester off due to COVID. It just made more sense for me to take some time off and just focus on practicing. And I took a few lessons, and so yeah, I've got 3 more semesters left before I finish off.
Okay. Wow. Very cool. Well, thanks for doing this. This is a fun idea. This is an idea. Like, I think about how many of my musician friends, like my parents weren't musicians. I mean, my dad played a little ukulele ukulele, and my mom took some violin lessons back in the day, but they were essentially not musicians. But I look at how many of my colleagues have kids that play instruments, and how many of them actually have kids that play the same instrument. Even if the parent didn't set out to say like, hey, here, I play violin, you play violin, or that sort of thing. So it's interesting. Like, and I'm thinking Scott Best, my friend who's principal bass in Memphis, comes to mind, and both his daughters are musical, and I think that they're coming up. They're probably just about ready to graduate high school now. But it's such a common thing. I think. Am I wrong on that, or what are your thoughts or observations?
Yeah, to me it seems fairly common. It also, it's amazing how many parents or colleagues, rather, musical colleagues, when I say, yeah, I taught my daughter, they look at me in horror and say, how did you do that? I could never do that. How did you make it last? Or they'll say something like, I taught my kid exactly 2 lessons and then it was over. So, yeah. But, many people, like my parents, my mother was a violin teacher and an orchestra teacher. And that's kind of how I found my way to the bass. I was sick of piano. And I just said to my mom, hey, Mom, is there anything I can do like in orchestra that I could pick up like over the summer and I'd still be like not embarrassingly bad, where they'd need me? And she was like, yeah, the bass sounds right for that, Paul. So I picked up the bass over the summer and was in my junior high advanced orchestra, I think, the following fall because they needed me.
Did you, at what point did you think music was going to be it for you? Like, did you always want to do that? Because if you had that musical background in your family, I mean, was there a point in high school or junior high or something where you said that's it, or you kind of always knew it? Or
no, I came to it kind of reluctantly. I mean, I was growing up in Alaska, and I thought, sure, I seem to be succeeding up here. But, I just thought of New Yorkers and all of their advantages and how many, playing next to, studying with members of the New York Philharmonic, for instance. And I thought, how could I ever compete,
Mm-hmm.
So it took me, I met Jeff Braditich in Oregon in the summer of my junior year, going into my senior year. And I worked with him and 2 other bassists at Sun River Music Festival, I think. And that was kind of an eye-opening experience because the 2 others were great students of Roma Weisspapier in Spokane, and they could really play. And Brad just threw me into the deep end, with all of his technique and everything. And I was just trying to keep my head above water. And, he wrote me a letter afterwards and he said, I think you've got talent. We'd have to really start over with you, but, I'd love to try. So please look up Northwestern University. So anyway, that's kind of what I did. I applied to 1 other school. I applied to Northwestern and I applied to Calvin College in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where my 2 parents met. And I was either going to be a history major or a music major, depending on which school took me and which school I could afford. So, I was like not all in. I was like dipping my toes in the water just to see how it was because I didn't have great faith in what I could do. And then, what really got me, though, is I went to Interlochen Music Camp one summer. Well, the summer between my senior year of high school and college, and I decided in the end to go to Northwestern. So I was on this path, but I was like, okay, if things go south at Interlochen and I discover I really do not meet the grade, then I'm going to pack it up. And it's kind of turning into a more lengthy story maybe than you want to hear, but kind of key in that moment is I remember playing the audition at Interlochen Music Camp and thinking everybody is way better than me, walking into a room and hearing these bass players playing Kusevitsky and Dragonetti. I was playing Dragonetti and Bottesini. And, I was like, I don't deserve to be here. So I played my audition. And then we had to wait till the next day to see which orchestras we were placed in. And I remember walking back to the cabins, thinking, oh, that was horrible. How can you change a flight? I can't do this. I just don't belong. And came back the next day, and all of the kids were huddled around seeing where they were placed in which orchestra. And I looked up and down those lists. I was there with another friend of mine from Alaska, up and down those lists. And I was like, oh, please. I couldn't find my name in the orchestras at all. And I thought, oh my goodness, did they put me in band? And so I looked in the bands. I didn't even make the band. And I was like, I was totally right. I'm way out of my league. And I said to my friend next to me, I was like, David, is it possible they don't put you in anything and you just take lessons? He said, no, you idiot, you've got to be up here. So then he was like, look, I said, I don't see it. It's not anywhere. So then he right away went to, the World Youth Symphony Orchestra, and he pointed at the bass section. He said, Paul, you're principal bass of the top orchestra. So from then it was kind of a earth-shaking moment. Jack Boudreau told me at the end of the thing that, he and Larry Hurst were kind of like just trying to mess with everybody. Some hick from Alaska comes and plays a pretty darn good Dragonetti concerto, and they were like, let's see what they all do. We throw this kid up there in the front and see how long he lasts. And indeed, I lasted 7 of the 8 weeks at the top. And Jack Boudreau he said, I have to give you a big hug. And he gave me a big hug. He said, we were messing around and you hung every week. Larry and I were like, holy cow, the kid hung on. So anyway, that kind of shaped my trajectory. I thought maybe I do have something in me.
This episode is brought to you by Dorico, the advanced music notation software from Steinberg. And one of the features that perplexed me at first, and then I realized its brilliance, is their concept of flows. Here is Daniel Spreadbury, Senior Product Manager, on what flows are and how they work.
The ability to have multiple exercises or multiple songs or whatever, it's so obvious because music is very rarely just one through composed bit from start to end, whether it's a show or a symphony or a sonata or a songbook or whatever. Music's in sections. That's just how it works.
That is how it works, but that's not how most music notation software works. And the ability to break things up like that, oh my goodness. When I'm creating exercises or anything of the sort for my students or any sort of project that I have going, that makes organization so much easier. Exporting is a breeze. Everything that you do in Dorico is beautiful from the get-go, which is really cool coming from other pieces of software. Check them out at Dorico.com. That'll take you to their site on Steinberg's website. And they have a free product called Dorico SE where you can do practically everything that you can in the full version of Dorico for up to 2 parts. That's more than enough if you're doing bass duets or anything of the like. Thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, Dorico.
I've said it a million times. You're making something by hand out of wood. You can do everything right, and it can still go sideways.
That's Eric Roy of Upton Bass talking about their concept of no B stock. And though it's painful to work a piece of wood for days and discover some flaw, the right call, and this is what Upton does every time, is to just get rid of that wood and start new. You never know what's going on under the surface. Despite your best efforts, wood is an organic thing, and Upton takes its commitment to quality seriously. Learn more at uptonbass.com, and thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. Well, it can be hard to know, especially if you come from a more remote place. And I don't know if I'm from South Dakota. I don't know if that's more or less remote than Alaska. It's not as removed from the contiguous United States. I think it's smaller. But I remember I also went to Northwestern, so lots of shared history there to study with Brad and Edge, although we missed each other. But I remember getting there with my dad and I was going to play my audition. And my dad went up to the assistant conductor and the assistant conductor was talking and said, well, you're probably going to be in the chamber orchestra, the second orchestra. And my dad said, you don't know about this young man here. He was principal bass of the South Dakota Symphony. I remember the conductor was like, whoa, But it's hard to know, depending on where you're from. And there's nothing like getting thrown into the deep end. Like Ella, so you're obviously also grew up around music. Did you always think you're going to be doing what you're doing? And you're at the earlier stages of your career still, but like, did you have anything else in mind, or was there a certain point where you thought, I'm going to go for it?
Yeah, so I guess I started on violin and then started playing bass when I was 7. But I mean, throughout my years, especially middle school, early high school, I really wasn't sure if that's what I wanted to do. I played it for fun, and my dad never forced me to play. It was just something that I kind of picked up and played whenever I wanted to, and always played in youth symphonies and orchestras and stuff like that, and grew my love of music through that, and found it incredibly fulfilling, but never knew that it was what I wanted to do. I got really into sports. I was always doing gymnastics, running, basketball. So I was always doing a whole lot of things. So it was hard to fit everything in one basket. I do remember early on in high school, I attended BUTI. And so that was similar to his Interlochen experience. That was really formative because I feel like that was the first experience where I got to play some of the great music. And I got to see Boston Symphony play and all the great musicians at Tanglewood at that time. And it was when I really experienced the greats that I was like, I think I want to do this. I remember exactly the moment. I remember playing Appalachian Spring in the Ozawa Hall and watching the light stream through and just feeling this like sense of purpose in me. And so ever from that moment on, I decided to study with my father at the School of the Arts, which has a small bass studio, similar to like how colleges run their studios. We have like master classes, lessons, and I just really loved the work that goes into music. And so throughout the rest of my high school years, I was always playing with the idea of doing something else. I thought about architecture or design or something, and even applied to a couple schools on top of auditions that were for academic purposes, just always kind of keeping that door open. But in the end, I just couldn't think of any sort of work that would make me feel more fulfilled than music, and any sort of work that I would enjoy more than working in a practice room. It's the kind of work that I love to do, even though it can be hard at times. I'm sure everyone can relate to that. But yeah, it kind of just felt like my life was leading me towards that. I didn't always know that, but yeah.
I will say, I think she knew before I did that she wanted to be a musician, because I remember the moment very distinctly. I was kind of looking for internships for her to, work with an architecture firm or something. And I was like, we're going to milk this bass thing to get you into a good school, and it's going to pay a scholarship, and that's how I worked at her trajectory. And I was just talking with that and about her in the hallway at UNCSA, just like that was the assumption. And she looked at me with a shocked expression and she said, "Dad, I want to be a bass player." And I said, "What?" She said, "You didn't know that? I want to be a bass player." I was like, "You're kidding." And then I must have had a shocked expression. She said, "You look disappointed." And I said, no, I'm delighted. That's fantastic. This is fantastic. You just rocked my world for a second. I can figure this out now. I mean, there is, I think there's with anybody, well, maybe not anybody. I think with many people whose kids follow in their footsteps, whether it's like they take over the family store or, they, like my cousin became a dentist in his father's footsteps. I remember my uncle saying, why did he? Just dentistry? Why? Because how hard it is. I mean, the grind of going to auditions, and the kind of the work she says she loves. Mm-hmm. The amount of work it doesn't. When you're really trying to make ends meet, sometimes it's not so easy, right? And so suddenly when she said she wanted to be a musician, I was both delighted because, I loved her playing and loved the fact that she was inspired by music in the same way that I was, like a moth to flame kind of. But at the same time, just the reality of, okay, pull up the pants, let's get ready. So yeah, that changed everything. It had gone from, it was always fun, but it was now going to be more conscientious and directed from my part.
Well, so like I said, my parents were just musical dabblers. But one thing that you two might be able to relate to my situation is my dad was a principal in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and was my principal for a period of time. And which I was young, I think it was only kindergarten, but I still remember well. But it's like, like the feeling of like, the guy that's telling you to take out the trash, also being the guy that's ready. And then as I got older, he became principal at one of the other junior high schools. So he was the principal of kids I would meet, and some of them didn't like him so much. And so I've never had I had one time my mom played a little bit of trombone, and for some reason when I was a teenager, she tried to teach me trombone, and I got along with my mom fine, but I was so annoyed at her trying to tell me musical instructions. I was like, let me do it, Mom. Let me just try it myself. But like having that feeling of the same person who's telling you to take out the trash, teaching you Dittersdorf or something. I mean, I think that a lot of people would think that could be challenging. And I'm sure although obviously you two appear to get along great, I'm sure there were moments of struggle, perhaps.
Oh, definitely. Like a mixed basket of everything. But I think we take everything with a grain of salt. Like annoyance, it's just something to laugh off. Yeah, I guess going to school, I spent a lot of time with him in my late high school years. I spent 3 years. We'd drive together to school. We'd work out at the same time.
Her best friends were my students, It was just, I knew way too much.
Yeah. So, whenever I was walking around on campus with a friend or something, he'd come over, and if there were a new person, he'd like go, now, who is this? And so I could never escape him. Which both caused tension, but was also, he treats his studio like family. He gives so much of his time to them. And so I feel like I always grew up in this broader family of bass players. And I still keep in touch with all the people that were even college students when I was in early high school, and felt like they were somehow my teachers at the time. But it's always been a tight-knit community, which, I'm sure as bass players know, it always is a tight-knit community, but specifically with him, the amount of time that he gives to people and the number of barbecues out back where I'd meet his students and stuff like that, I always felt like I grew up in this bigger family. So I think it's a happy medium of both. Whenever I'd walk into a lesson, we very much treated it as a lesson, strictly business. But also the way that he treats his students is very fatherly as well. So I think it's like a happy medium for how I learned from him.
I think it got easier when she went to UNCSA, because then I was grading her,
Yeah.
And also I think maybe she understood intuitively that if she became a slacker, that was going to be a big problem. I don't know. Or I think maybe innately she says she likes the work. And I think that is indeed true. She's not making that up, because she just always, one of the hardest workers, if not the hardest worker in the studio, just always practicing and working. So that made it really easy. But if I was having to apologize for her, I never had to do that. Thankfully, that made it easy.
What?
But the difficulty, the hard part, I think, was like entering, it was fine from 7, 8, 9, 10. I could be, just the encouraging, positive dad. And then, and kind of enjoying the fact that, we were using the George Vance method, and I have this way of teaching scales so that, I would prep her to go into a youth symphony audition. And when they'd say, you must play 2 scales of your choice, I'd say, no, you say, what scales do you want to hear? So I kind of had a kind of geeky enjoyment in what I was creating, and please tell me. And if they say, oh, you pick, then play G flat, for crying out loud, So, and if they ask for 1 octave, do 2. If they ask for 2, do 3, There's a little bit of bass geekiness associated with it, with that age in particular, because she was this petite little blonde girl walking in with a 10th size bass. She played for quite a while. And, they're first of all knocked flat by seeing such a tiny instrument and then this petite little girl coming in, So you just kind of wanted to bowl them over with surprises. That was kind of funny. I'm sounding like a stage parent. I never realized I was, but here we are on a podcast with Jason Heath.
This episode is brought to you by Ear Trumpet Labs. They make hand-built mics out of Portland, Oregon, and they have an excellent mic for upright bass called Nadine. The Nadine is a condenser mic with a clear, natural sound and incredible feedback rejection. This mic is a completely new design. The head mounts in between the strings above the tailpiece with a rubber grommet, and the body securely straps to the tailpiece with Velcro elastic. A 14-inch Mogami cable connects the two parts, making it easy to place on any bass. It's durable and holds up to the demanding needs of the instrument while offering excellent sound quality. Ear Trumpet Labs is offering a free t-shirt just for Contrabass Conversations listeners with the purchase of a mic. Just visit www.eartrumpetlabs.com/contrabass to claim yours and check out the Nadine. After several years of planning, I'm so happy that my course, Beginner's Classical Bass, is out on Discover Double Bass. This course is made up of 66, yes, that's a lot, video lessons which cover a wide range of topics on classical double bass, starting from taking your bass out of the case, which is very fun to film, and Jeff Chalmers of Discover Double Bass and I have a great blooper reel about that, and leading to different bow strokes such as staccato and portato. The topics also include posture, simple scales and arpeggios, left-hand technique, bowing technique, simple pieces which are fun to play, practice tips, and much more. You can learn more through the link in the show notes or just visit discoverdouble.bass.com/Jason Heath. What is this setup for North Carolina School of the Arts? Like, just for folks that might not know about the school, since you teach there and she went there, like, yeah, what's just talk through the program maybe for a bit.
Yeah. So, we've always been associated with the University of North Carolina system. And for many years, it was known as just the North Carolina School of the Arts. And maybe 6 years, maybe 8 years ago, they changed the name to University of North Carolina School of the Arts because people just didn't realize that it was a university program. Mm-hmm. So I have a graduate program, we have a college program, and then we have the high school program. And for students lucky enough to be North Carolinians, they can be like boarding school students. It's designed to be the Conservatory of the South is how it came to be. In fact, it started I think in the mid 60s by Vittorio Giannini, and I think he was the first dean. And their first bass teacher they hired was Gary Carr. And he was here, I don't know whether he was here for a year or two, but he's always said he really loved his time in Winston-Salem. And so there's this high school program and then the college program. And Ella said, it's like a big family. And indeed it is. That's how I describe it to kids when they're interested in coming here. They're like, well, how does that work with the undergrads and grads and high schoolers all mixed in? And I said, just imagine a big Thanksgiving dinner, everybody is kind of partaking, and you're kind of enjoying the youngsters, and you're enjoying the teenagers, and then the 20 somethings, and then the grandpa. So it's all, we all get a lot of joy of watching each of us grow. I think the young high schoolers I get in this program, you can imagine, being a conservatory setup as a ninth grader coming in, for example, and working alongside grad students and college students, going to master class every week with them, playing in orchestra next to them. They have to have a certain standard before I'll take them in the high school program, of course, because they have to mix well in the orchestra and in the orchestras. So it's like, the most fertile soil you can imagine for a ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade. It's just like, they practice 4 hours a day here. They're serious, So it's a tremendous place to teach for that reason. And in fact, I tell many people, when they ask about my job, that it's like my dream job. I can't imagine a better situation. What's better than plucking a 14-year-old, from their school orchestra and then putting them in this environment and coaching them to, really, really develop as a bass player. I think I'm quite proud of the success I've had placing my high school students because of that. The environment just works.
It seems,
and then the undergrads and grad students benefit as well. Because they become I often ask them, can you help this student with this? Or they'll come to me and say, somebody's struggling with this. In master class, I open it up and watch the grad students teach for a while. So they really get that very well-rounded experience working with pedagogy from a young age all the way up into advanced pre-professional or professional kind of pedagogy and teaching. So I think it really benefits everybody.
Is there any other program in the U.S. like it that is like a high school experience that then goes beyond into the collegiate level? I don't think so. Colburn comes to mind, but it's not the same model. They have college and pre-college, right, but it's different. And there are a couple other Juilliard, but that's different. It's more of like a music school program. Right. It makes sense. I see the School of the Arts, on a lot of resumes as I look around over the years, and it makes sense. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, or whatever the old saying is. If you're around all these college players and graduate students as a high school player, it's bound to rub off on you. And in addition to the pedagogy, if you're someone who's maybe feeling like slacking and you see some gunners coming up, some 15 or 16-year-olds playing Bottesini, it's good to make you not rest on your laurels, I'll bet.
Oh, absolutely. That's the case. It scares me what the high schoolers do after even within a year or two. And, this next class I have coming in, I'm particularly excited about. Just great kids, hard workers.
Ella, so going from North Carolina and then moving to Los Angeles, I just love asking, we can think of a few things that those states have in common or those cities have in common. We can probably think of a lot of things that are different too. And just like moving to California in general, as someone who came from a remote place, lived in the cold Midwest for a long time, and now I lived in San Francisco for the last 6 years, it was a real shockaroo. And then there's so many, obviously where you are in LA, and then just that whole experience, and then COVID. So there's all that. But if we think about before that, what was it like moving to Los Angeles and moving to California? How's that experience been?
Yeah, definitely. I like to joke that I tried to get as far away as I could, but that's really just a joke that I like to make. The main reason I moved there was because of I wanted to study with David Moore. I had a lesson with him, and I had heard so much about his pedagogy that I was like, this is who I want to study with. My dad had never met him before, and he had a whole lot of ideas coming from different lineages of teaching. And so I felt like I had reaped all the benefits from my dad's teaching. Not that there still isn't more to learn. That's not what I meant.
Such a nice daughter I have, Jason. I'm so proud of her. She was watching me wilt over in the corner here.
But I figured I'd have this resource for a long time. So I decided to try something different. And I knew David Moore was he was definitely, with his fractal fingerings and his bowing ideas currently, I knew he had some really great ideas floating around. So that's the reason that I wanted to go to Los Angeles. I think when I auditioned there, I spent maybe a day, didn't get to see much, and then flew out. And so as soon as my colleges, I decided on attending USC, it was like, all right, now let's see what's in Los Angeles. And it's been fantastic. The weather's gorgeous. There's great hiking, there's mountains, there's beaches. I didn't have a car the first couple of years, which makes it a little bit harder to love because you're kind of stuck in this concrete jungle. But as soon as I'd get out and be able to take some fresh breaths, plus, it's beautiful year round, so you can practice outside. That's you see people practicing everywhere. I have my own special stoop that I'd always practice on, and I don't know, that's always really fun.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And it's kind of an aside, but it's interesting to me that now 6 years living in Northern California, but I do a lot of work in Southern California, and it's hilarious to see the various rivalries that people have, they think we're a bunch of pretentious Patagonia wearing, startup working people, and we think they're a bunch of vapid airheads driving in their convertibles to their auditions, on the 405. And so it's just kind of interesting. But but yeah, it's the getting you that year-round consistency and that wet blanket of humidity that you get. I know in North Carolina, to a limited extent in Chicago. That's something that now, like I'm going to go back to South Dakota next week, which is usually a cold, frigid place. Although I can't say anything bad, or my mom will let me know about it because she listens to the podcast. But right now, it's that wet blanket of humidity. That's something that I definitely. It's not my least favorite weather, but it's something I don't miss.
Definitely. Like when I'm running consistently in California and then I go for a run here, it's such a noticeable difference. I'm like, I can't do this.
You asked about what it was like to move to California, and she talked about wanting to study with David Moore. And I was just remembering my as she was, I know all of the great bass teachers, and I have a good understanding about what they teach and what they're like, and I know many of them personally. But I was really determined to stay out of her choice as much as possible. I mean, if there was somebody I thought was not a good fit, then I would say that. But in terms of, I wanted her to audition at a bunch of places and meet all of these bass players, and then to kind of turn it over to her and let her make the choice. Because you really, at least I really worried about kind of becoming too strong an influence and her not, I wanted her to choose this path for her own passion and her own love. And I particularly didn't want her to ever say, why did you make me study with so-and-so, it just was not the right choice. So I tried to give her lots of space and kind of give her lots of control, or I guess they call it agency these days, to make that choice so that she could, both own it and benefit from having that control. So anyway, I was really, when she was really expressing interest in David Moore, who I knew very little about. I mean, just, things I'd read and hear on your podcast, for instance, but had no personal knowledge. I was really intrigued because what she was going to get from him, indeed, as she said, stuff that I knew nothing about. So I knew that, I could kind of, when she'd come home, I'd be like, okay, what's he teaching you now? And that sort of thing. And I will say, after she took her audition at USC, she came back and was playing in the practice room, and I was hearing this big sound because I could kind of hear the practice rooms in my room, just a monstrous sound. And I was like, who is that? So I walked around the corner and opened the door, and it was Ella. And she'd always had a good sound. I thought it was fantastic. And I was like, you're kidding, such a huge sound. What are you doing? Did you change something? She said, I just did what David Allen Moore told me to do. I was like, great. Both proud and like, well, wait a second. I thought I was a good teacher of tone, but David gave her something special. So that made me feel especially good about her decision to go there.
Well, it's so interesting to get to contact or learn about people outside of your like familiar, zone of teachers you interact with and that kind of thing. I remember back when I was teaching private bass in Chicago, I had several students that ended up going to study with David and learning more about David and what he did. I never had any interaction with him, but then my students would come back and talk about him, and it was really interesting. That's one of the things that's fun about this podcast for me is I get to learn what's going on in these different parts of the country and people who teach differently than I learned and that kind of thing. It's absolutely. One of the things that people have asked me a lot in my weird position, or I get emails from people I don't know with like college audition advice. That's something I even did a whole episode on it back 4 or 5 years ago with a high school senior in Texas. And I think she went to BU, if I remember right, but named Bailey Brown. Sorry, Bailey, if I'm getting your school wrong.
I know Bailey.
Okay, yeah. Maybe I got the school wrong. I don't know. But so Paul, you've probably given a lot of advice over the years, to people maybe those you don't. And Ella, you just like navigated the college process. So like, let's say both of you, or you could answer individually, we're going to like give a lecture on how to apply for colleges if you're interested in bass. And this is kind of a huge question, so sorry about that. But like, what are some of the things that either of you would recommend people do in terms of like, how many schools to apply for, state school, private school? Do you go visit? And, COVID, that's been a whole thing where people can't visit. So like what might you tell someone interested in auditioning, or some worried parent parent whose kid is going to go into music, or what advice? And again, apologies for the giant question.
Oh yeah, no. I think my main thing and the reason I chose my school and ended up going to USC was because I got a lesson. And my main recommendation would be try to get a lesson with each teacher, whether it be like 30 minutes or if you're lucky you have to get an hour. I just knew from like the first 10 minutes of my lesson with David that the way he taught and the way that how pragmatically he thinks about the bass really worked well with my own learning style. So it's often not about which teacher has like the best students, or of course that's important, but it's how you learn and how you interact with that teacher. And that was the most informative thing for me. Aside from that, I think I maybe applied to 6 schools, like maybe 5 music schools, another academic school. And I mean, it's a lot, especially in your senior year to be traveling constantly. But I liked having the wide range. I think I covered all parts of the United States just to have all my bases covered. And yeah, so I guess my main bit of advice is just try to get a lesson, try to understand how that teacher teaches and if it matches your learning style.
Mm-hmm. I also, I accompanied her on all of these things, which was a fascinating thing to be the parent, gave me lots better understanding about how parents feel, schlepping their kid around with a bass and taking him places. And I was much more receptive to her saying, I just don't think I could practice well in this, in this room, or I just, it feels so great. I found myself listening to those things in a way that I would have thought ahead of time. I was like, you go for the teacher, you can practice anywhere, just, do it, but I was more receptive, and I it could be just Ella, knowing Ella, how she works best and kind of understanding that she needs things in a certain way. She needs to have her tea there, and she needs a certain amount of peace. For her to go to a school where it was just really hectic to find a room and then finally get one after, waiting for 45 minutes and then be in this cramped room that barely fit the bass. This is not, I didn't feel like that would be the recipe for her success. So, just amazed that actually the facilities I was actually concerned about. It feels like such a bougie thing to think about, well, I hope the dorms are nice, and do they have a wading pool or, a lazy river for her to float in to relax? I'm not that kind of parent, but, when it came to like practice area, I was particularly attentive. So I think it does matter.
That's a giant thing with the you're taking me back to my days at Northwestern, which now, of course, the school I went to, Northwestern, and the school I taught at DePaul, they now have brand new shiny facilities. So this is like irrelevant now, but my goodness, this Regenstein Hall that I had, that Paul, you probably had, like it was the practice room hyenas, or whatever you want to call it, were like circling by 8 a.m. And if you didn't have a room, that was it. So if you had an 8 a.m. class, no practicing for you, buddy. So I would walk across to this little building called the Beehive, and it was so far across campus, but because it was so far across campus, nobody would go there. And actually, my one brush with tendonitis was because I was walking my bass so much. My left arm was just giving out on me, the strain of carrying my bass, and then no AC in the Beehive or anything like that. And now to go to Northwestern or DePaul, which is like it's dramatically transformed, it really does make a difference. What those and even little things that you might not, unless you'd been around the block a bit, like the general morale at both of those schools. Not like it was low; they were both good music schools, but boy, there's nothing like a facilities refresh or something like that, and you can feel that. I remember at the bass convention at Indiana University, walking around, and it's like just all that stuff. Like, especially if you're going to music performance, that teacher relationship, you really want to get that dialed in right. But there are a bunch of other factors, aren't there?
There are. And, as a professor or, a teacher of high school students applying, I'm always advocating that they apply not only to music schools, but also to non-music schools. Even if they're pretty, they know they're committed. I don't feel quite good unless I know they've got one, like, academic school there, unless that bass is all they can conceive of. Because I've had kids go through the entire process, audition at great music schools, and then say, after doing all this, I don't actually think I want to do this career. I mean, just the reality of doing it. So I would recommend that, and I would recommend for sure applying at a broad swath of schools. I mean, if you have financial need, I mean, know which schools, will offer the financial resources to offset your tuition. There are certain schools out there which do a really good job meeting financial need, and do your research to see which ones will do that, because that's a huge factor. The finances, when you're just applying, often don't seem that real. But when it comes to May and you're having to make that choice, and it's like, okay, I either go in debt $40,000 per year, or I go to this other school for, and I'll go into debt $2,000 per year. That should be a huge choice, that should be a huge factor. Mm-hmm. So you got to have lots of, I mean, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect 6 or 8 schools that you've auditioned for. You got to find the right mix with the teacher and, the facilities and the financial package. There are a lot of variables, and it can all go haywire, and you can find yourself with really no great choice at all,
Oh, the financial aid package thing, and I thought it was highway robbery back in 1994. I was at Northwestern. I think the tuition was $15,000. I thought $15,000. What a ripoff, So, but I remember when I was teaching at DePaul, I would listen to all these bass auditions, and we had it was Alex Hanna, Rob Kassinger, and me, and I thought it was hilarious. I'm on this list, and if anybody listed me as the choice, I knew they hadn't done their homework. So they were like immediately disqualified. But though I had some wonderful students at DePaul, but we had these financial aid options. I don't know how it is for you, Paul, but it was like admit full scholarship. That was like one box. Then it was admit some scholarship. There was like admit no scholarship. There was like deny. And I remember thinking, it's like, geez, these little check boxes, we're talking about 6 figures, in their life if you check the right or the wrong box. And that trying to find a wide, broad swath, whatever the term is, I feel like I generally advised my high school students reasonably well, but I did have one student, and it was just, everything just didn't quite line up. Like, she applied to just not quite as many schools. They were just a little bit of reach. There was nothing that was real safe. And this is like well over a decade ago. And come senior year, this poor young woman, she didn't get into any of the schools. Now she got waitlisted, and she ultimately did. But then I was a high school teacher, and I thought, like, the feeling this poor girl must have had walking around, and all your friends, and this is one of those schools, it's like all the billboards were announcing who got into where and whatever, and to know, like, just that feeling, I felt so, I was like, what did I do wrong? And so I think I just wasn't encouraging enough to, like you were saying, like, add either one academic school or add one, a state school that's a little bit more of a guarantee or something like that. And things did work out, but it's a big deal.
It is, yeah, for sure.
I had my very first. My very first student that was serious about going on to bass. I was maybe 24, 25 or something, and teaching them private lessons. And they said, they were a senior. They're like, "Where should I apply?" And I said, "I don't know, Eastman, blah blah." I just named 5 random schools off the top of my head. He applied to those exact schools, and I'm like, "Oh no, I just shaped this young man's life, with no thought." And he's now principal bass, but he's like, it all worked out, but still I thought, like, I should maybe take that advice a little more seriously.
Yeah, it's really fun. Some years I'll have like 4 students graduating from the high school program, and I have to refill for the next year. But those years, it's a very exciting time to guide a student through the process, even after they've gotten their awards, just to say, well, make sure you talk to both of those schools. If you really want to go to one school and they've given you X amount of dollars, but that you could come if they'd given you, $500 5, 8 more or something, then you need to talk to them and tell them that, I mean, everything, is still a negotiation until May 1st comes along,
Ella, did you have like so many people, did all your auditions kind of bunch up in January, February? Did you have like audition, or was it more spread out, or?
They were somewhat spaced out. Yeah, none of them. I think it did work out with BU and another school that I could drive through. So I landed in one, rented a car, drove from Boston, I think to Philadelphia. And those were the only two that lined up. The others all, I had to fly out specifically for those auditions. And it really helped through like music festivals and whatnot that I knew someone at each of the schools. And so I remember I stayed with one friend in one place, went with my dad to another, but got dinner with another friend. It really got like the inside scoop on each of the schools. And you get really honest opinions from the people when they're there. You get the good, the bad, and you can weigh it all. So yeah, it was a bit spaced out, which was kind of relaxing because the one that was the one that I had to drive in between, I think I actually did 3 stops, one for like an academic, but I played bass for like the orchestra teacher there or something. That was a bit hectic because they were completely different programs, and felt like I was just grasping by the end, but got through it.
What in terms of the rep, I think it's always interesting because these things change a lot and they're not standard for every school, but how specific or not specific was all the rep that you had to play for all the auditions? And I ask because I remember for a long time there were a couple schools, I don't know if it was Juilliard or what, that were like very specific, and then a lot of places were just play 2 pieces and some Bach, like how many hoops did you have to jump through to get the repertoire ready? And like did you feel like you had everything dialed in by fall of senior year? That's something that I know people kind of have stressed out about when I've been working with them in high school.
Right. I think there were mostly it was just 2 differing pieces with some excerpts. Most of them weren't too specific on that, although, yeah, like you said, Juilliard, still more specific. And then I think the other one was Curtis, which just had another curveball thrown at you. But
what was it?
I think it was a show piece specifically, or because I know I had to pull out a Bottesini piece. I played that one for that, but
and then BU asked for an etude.
Yeah, an etude, which no other schools had asked for an etude, so that was that was a fun one. But yeah, I mean, they were still pretty lax, and I think even more today, they're really looking to see more progressive repertoire rather than the same things over and over again. I think that will get you very far. And I think even USC is changing their audition requests to including BIPOC composers or works, really stressing the importance of bringing a diverse repertoire.
Well, it was so great to hear you at WABASE, Ella, play Andres Martin's concerto. I think you played the second one, and like just hearing and also as a teacher, if I never hear nothing wrong with Kusevitsky concerto, but if I never hear Kusevitsky concerto movement 1 on Audition again, I'll probably be okay. I have this list of random lessons learned of things you probably don't want to do in auditions, and particularly college auditions, that I learned from DePaul. I'll share a few, and maybe you have some others you could add. One is anybody at DePaul who came in there, they played, and this happened more than once. It was like, yeah, I'm just like really tired. I came in and I don't know, this bass isn't really playing. Like nobody who started out with excuses ever got in. I don't think it was ever. Right. And you'd be amazed how many people started off that way. Not being sure what the requirements are, even if they're like though it's okay, like we never were like, get out, if somebody did that, but like I don't think it's not like a good sign when you can't follow the simple instruction of like play Bach. It's like, oh, I'm supposed to play Bach? Oh
yeah,
no. So I don't know. Right. I don't know if you can relate to any of those.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah. I think. Yeah, it's really funny going to auditions and seeing how different people, because you'd see the same people each time, and just seeing how different people handle auditions. When I get nervous, I talk a lot. So I just try to talk to everyone, and I could tell when someone was receptive of that or if they just kind of wanted to be in their zone and focus. And some people have that, and I respected that. But it was really funny just how different schools also handled that. Like some schools had a big audition room or like a warm-up room where everyone would go in, and that can seem pretty daunting, but you could always tell who was confident, who was nervous, and just trying to like focus on how you deal with auditions and just try and make it as light as possible. And especially going out with friends afterwards. I think that was the most fun about auditions is I saw so many friends, and after each audition, we just kind of like, just were like, how's the audition? You guys say good or bad? And then you're like, all right, I guess we've got another one. And then just like brush it off and have fun.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's my next like bit of advice for audition is have fun. Try and meet people while you're out there, because you'll definitely cross paths with them again.
Yeah. And I think that advice that you said, or what you did of trying to get a lesson in with people, because if you show the commitment that you're interested enough to go like play for somebody, and then you audition and you've heard growth. I mean, that's like so many of the people that especially got into Alex Hanna's studio at DePaul, that was like almost all of them had a lesson. It wasn't a requirement, obviously, but that was just very common. I have no point to this story except I thought it was kind of funny. Alex Hanna came on faculty at DePaul his first year there. I was teaching there and Rob was there. And remember, Alex came in and he was like, I think he had his sport jacket on and his notepad, and he was like ready to do. And Rob was like in his biking gear and whatever. And I don't know what I was wearing, but Alex, he was ready to like be the new professor. And the first person came in and just played and just ate it. It was like one of those auditions. It's like, it just makes you feel like nobody can ever play bass because and so they left and Rob was like, yeah, that's pretty much the best audition we've heard in years. Like totally straight face. And you just saw Alex, the color drain out of his face. and then Rob, but it went up from there. But I remember, it's interesting in the college audition because you're there. It is obviously about how you play, but you also want to make sure that you're a good fit, that the student's a good fit for you. So I found it interesting. A few years in, we started to get a laptop during the auditions that had all of their application materials, like their high school transcripts and their letters of recommendation. And I thought, all right, I was teaching high school at the time, so I thought, all right, I'll be the person to like look through that stuff. And it's really interesting, just like sniffing out, especially someone who was teaching high school. It's like, I wonder what this person's like as a student. And you're looking through, and you're like, uh-oh, lots of C's. The recommendation letters are a little bit weird. They made an excuse. It's amazing, even if it's just 5 minutes or 8 minutes or whatever, how much you can learn about a person in one of those experiences.
Absolutely. I am the assistant dean at my School of Recruitment and Enrollment, so I work very closely with the admissions team through all year. We even just met today in the summer. And yes, I mean, just reading through, in my early years as a faculty member, I was just like, can they play the bass? Is it in tune? How's the rhythm? But, it tells you so much to read through the transcript and read the letters of recommendation. Find somebody who knows you well enough so that they can actually write something that tells a story about you. I mean, that's just much more interesting to read. And the older I get, the more I value those things, because I want a student who's a good fit. And I want a student who I think has a reasonable chance of succeeding, at my school. And, it is a conservatory, but the academic classes really matter. You stay in school if you pass them. If you don't, then it's trouble, and you're distracted. So, I mean, all the component of the application is important. Even like, say, a lot of times students will say, do I really need to write this artistic statement? The answer is yes. I will say I don't read them that carefully personally, but there are some times when, I really want to go to bat for a student to get a big scholarship. And you can be sure everybody along the line reads everything in there, and you don't know when that'll happen. As a student, you have no idea. Will you be in a situation where your bass professor is going to ask for another $5,000 and then pass that application on the line? And then the dean and perhaps the provost might be reading this letter, So, I mean, I also tell people not to stress out that much about the artistic statement or whatever. But, do keep in mind that, this could be read by more than just the bass professor. Mm-hmm. It's not just about your, how well you play the bass, but every aspect of a person kind of goes into the quality of their craft and how they work in a section. I mean, all of this stuff actually does matter in real life.
The older I've gotten and the more people I've worked with over the years, the more I've learned to never the more optimistic kind of I've gotten about where people might end up. I've tried to never write anybody off. You never know who the people that I thought were going to be superstars so often went in a totally different direction, and maybe in a better direction for them. Maybe the people that I thought I don't know, have become some of the strongest people that I've worked with, and people change course in college so often, whether it's to get more into bass or move out of it or realize or move out and then come back. I mean, there's just there's the more, and Paul, you've taught way more people at different levels than I have. But in my experience, the more I've sort of gotten sunnier as I've gotten older in terms of like where people can end up. It's that mindset and that outlook that is so critical, and that's why I do think it is interesting, like you're saying about the complete package. Like you do want to play your Andres Martin or Kusevitsky or whoever, at a high level. That is quite important. You don't want to let someone in that's not there, but you want to like try to see those sort of growth mindset qualities in people, if you can suss that out.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. You reminded me of a student that not a bass student, but a student that I coached in chamber music and that sort of thing at Texas Tech University when I was there. And, he would just kind of mail it in for juries, and you'd be like, oh boy, what's he doing? And seemed kind of sleepy all the time. And this kid, who I thought, what's he going to do in life? What's it? He's become one of the most highly recognized public school orchestra teachers in the state of Texas, which is saying a lot. I mean, gets great awards, and his kids are on fire, and the orchestra is on fire. It's like, whenever I start to feel that, like, about a student, like, oh, this is hopeless, I just think of that kid and think of all the good he's doing right now. Mm-hmm. It's pretty amazing.
Oh, yeah. Ella, I found this piece of paper a few years ago, and I was probably maybe 2 or 3 years older than you when I wrote it, or maybe around your age, but I wrote Jason's long-term goals, and it was like 28, 10-year member of a bass section, which I never got. 35 principal bass of, I think I picked a specific orchestra like Indianapolis or something, which I obviously didn't get. And then I think it was like 40 was my year. Chicago Symphony principal bass. Oh yeah. And I remember pulling that out when I was around 40 and thinking like, well, none of that happened, but I'm glad what did happen. So you never know where you're going to end up, but that's a long way of asking, like, where do you see yourself? Do you have any, and you don't have to name specific orchestras, but like, what do you see doing in like 5 years, 10 years, or possibly further? I imagine bass is in the picture, but...
Yes, bass is in the picture. That's a good question, because I feel like for me, it's changed every year. Like, I guess it's been 3 years since I auditioned for schools. And at that point, I was still unsure whether I wanted to go orchestral or teaching, or, and even within the past couple of years, I've discovered early music as a passion of mine. And so I've been playing more instruments, gamba, violone, and really embracing all forms of music where I can. And so I guess the next step, the next short-term goal, I guess, is in a year and a half, I'll be auditioning for grad schools, and whether I want to go more in depth in early music and finding a school that has both disciplines in bass and early music, or whether I want to go straight bass, because I do love orchestral music, and it's been over a year since I've been able to play in a section. I played a couple gigs here and there, but haven't been in a full orchestra. So who knows, maybe as soon as I play with a full orchestra again, I'll be all ready for that. But I don't know, at the moment, I'm kind of figuring it out, which I think is okay, especially after a year of uncertainty. I've discovered a love of teaching. I've discovered a love of individual practicing early music bass. So I've got a lot of different things going on, and I think they all play into each other. They all inform each other. Whenever I teach, I get better as a bass player. Whenever I play early music, I get better at my ensemble playing, and vice versa. So I don't quite have a clear answer for that. But I have a lot of different things that I know are going to coexist and will inform each other. I just don't quite know exactly what that means.
And I think it's exciting to not know. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life either. I'm 46 now, I think. I'm still figuring that out. Paul, maybe I'll throw you a variant of my traditional last question because I've never done a father-daughter episode before. If you could go back in time and give Paul... Ella, how old are you right now? 22? 21?
21.
21, okay. Paul, if you could go back and give 21-year-old Paul some advice, what might that be?
21-year-old Paul. Oh, get in the practice room. What the heck are you doing sitting on the couch? It's interesting. I mean, there have been certain points in my life where I was just ready to cash it in. Like, this is, bass isn't working out, or, and I mean, anybody looking at me would have said, "Oh, he's doing pretty well. He's teaching it." My first job was at Augustana College as an instructor, and I was playing in the orchestra there, and I had a thriving bass studio. It just wasn't where I wanted to get, and I just I stuck it out long enough until I got the right call from Texas Tech, and I took that audition. I mean. My advice would be, if you really love something, stick with it. I mean, there would have been a point, where if nothing had happened, then, I would have pulled the plug, and who knows, I might be a financial advisor or something like that. But it has been an amazing, amazing journey, full of difficulty and, moments where I really doubted myself, and then incredible. I mean, I love my life. I love where I've ended up, so just as you kind of said in your way, just be ready for disappointment when it comes. It's part of, trying to make it as a musician, and, embrace it, go with the flow, keep trusting what you do, figure out a way to pay the bills. I think I have tried to give Ella just this assurance, that she'll be fine. I was worried when I didn't practice. My first thought was, I'm going to be flipping burgers at McDonald's the rest of my life if I don't practice, which was really helpful. It got me motivated, and I was practicing on Saturday morning at 7 sometimes. That was my fear. I wouldn't want her to live in that kind of fear, though. She'll figure. You work hard. You pay attention to staying healthy, and things tend to work out. You'll figure something out, Things do tend to work out. I mean, that's like the lesson I've learned from 800 plus podcast chats is but that's really hard to see when you're in the moment, because it's like total chaos. Like, oh, I'm not going to get a job. I'm going to be flipping burgers, this or that. I biffed that audition. I got rejected by this or that. But then it looks so neat and tidy in the rearview mirror so often. But I don't know, and I could be wrong on this, but if I look at people that really were committed to like making it work with the thing that they're passionate about, I have to rack my brain to think about somebody that didn't make it work. It might not be exactly what they thought they were going to do. Like, I never thought I was going to do whatever the heck it is I do. But I would be, if I went back to like 21-year-old Jason and described what I do, I think that 21-year-old Jason would be thrilled. So yeah, it's right. Like that list I was talking about. I obviously achieved none of those goals, but I was committed to like finding something that I was fascinated by and thought about every day I woke up in the morning, and somehow it worked. Paul, I think the last time you graced the podcast was like 13 years ago or something like that. Bad Boys of Bass was some like I don't even know how we did that. I must have had you all call in to some number somehow. So it's long overdue. And Ella, great to chat with you. This is a great idea. I'm so thank you for the idea and for carving out some time to do it. I appreciate it.
So glad it worked out. Yeah.
It was a lot of fun, Jason. So.
Paul, Ella, thank you both for chatting. What a great idea. I love doing things that are a little bit out of the box like this, and so I really hope that you all enjoyed listening to it, and I totally loved chatting with both of you about it. And I've had Paul on the podcast. I don't remember if this came up in the interview, but with the Bad Boys of Bass back in like 2007 or something like that, we did some sort of phone call. I have no idea how we set up all that technology, but so great to have Paul back at a lengthier format like this. And Ella, thank you also. And folks, if you want to check out more about the Wabass Institute that I met Ella at and saw Paul at, and that's how the idea came up for this, I did a video about that, and you can check it out on my YouTube channel. If you just look for Wabass, I'm sure that'll be at the top of the search results, hopefully. So thank you for listening. I record these in batches. If you're not aware of that, I do 4 at a time typically, so this is 2 of 4. I've been battling the stinking cold, not COVID, because I know this because my wife and I both came down with something at the same time, and we were both vaccinated. We thought, what are the odds that we both got breakthrough COVID? This was maybe 3 weeks ago this happened, and my wife, because she's in medicine, any hint of anything has to go get tested, and it was not COVID, and we had the same exact symptoms. So, but I forgot what it's like to be sick. I'm coughing through the night. It's like week after week of this thing. I don't know what bug I caught, but it makes me realize, and this is what everybody says. Sorry, trying to hack my way through this as elegantly as possible. It makes me realize how great it is to not be sick. And I'm not really, I feel fine. I had like a week and a half of feeling like, that sort of like cold, kind of low energy. Now I feel fine. I'm just coughing. And there's nothing like coughing in public in pandemic times, like flying to and from South Dakota, hacking through my mask. That was fun. Went and saw Hamilton, which was awesome. Thank you, Tom Mendel, for the tickets. Tom Mendel's been on the podcast actually before. If you look back, maybe 2017, we chatted. And Tom's here in San Francisco opening up the touring production of Hamilton. So I got to see a preview show on Sunday, which is awesome. But of course, I still have this stupid cough, so I'm coughing, and I just feel anyway. I don't like coughing in public anyway, but especially right now, it's like alarm bells raised. But other than that, life is good. I am enjoying a week here in San Francisco, just sort of getting my bearings, getting projects like getting ahead on the podcast, getting ahead on the YouTube channel, working on a few projects that I'm really excited about, but I haven't. Anyway, I'll more on that later. But thank you for listening to the podcast. If you have not joined the email newsletter, that's something that people seem to really enjoy, and it's a great way to get connected with the bass world. Maybe when you just have a minute or two to scan. We send out emails every Tuesday and Friday, but it's I promise it's quick. It's to the point. So it'd be great to have you on that. If you're not, you can just go to contrabassconversations.com and you will be prompted there, or contrabassconversations.com/email. I think we'll get you there too. So thank you for listening. If you have an idea for a guest or a show or some sort of topic like this, I would love to hear it. Feedback at contrabassconversations.com will put you in touch with me, and I love hearing from people who listen to the show. Many cool things in the offering as we churn through 2021. I am certainly looking forward to getting more fully on the other side of this stinking never-ending pandemic. I feel so lucky that at least the events, though they might be slightly weird, have started back up. I think that's been good for my psychological health to see other humans and do musical things together. That has been great. So I hope that is happening for you no matter where you are in the world. I'm trying to just keep my head up and take a stoic-ish attitude to what's going on and know that I can only control what's in my sphere of things. So I can control if another variant wave happens and another one, or things shut down or they don't shut down. And so I'm just trying to focus on what I can control and do what I can do. And I hope that you're able to make the most of however things are in your neck of the woods. So thank you for listening. Thank you to the team that helped me put these together. Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Mitch Mooring, and Trevor Jones. Mitch makes beautiful basses in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Kilgore, Texas. Learn more at mitchmooring.com. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.